Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast, episode 31. My name is Alina Warwick, and I'm super excited to chat with Ahmed Elsamadisi about his path to success. His journey to entrepreneurship really started when he was barely accepted to Cornell University because he had the lowest SAT scores that entered college that year. He created a company called Narrator that's completely destroying the best practices in the data analysis world with his new invention. Ahmed was featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and I gotta say, it's quite an accomplishment to be featured on that list along with all the other impactful entrepreneurs and successful people that are changing the world. So, quick side note, I took this call with Ahmed while he was in Egypt visiting his hometown, and the satellite service, I tell you, wasn't all that great. So, just an FYI, you may hear some lags here and there, but I promise you, this episode is going to rock your world. So, let's hear all about how Ahmed started his company in his 20s and what it's like to be a young immigrant entrepreneur. Let's dive right in. Okay, Ahmed, thank you so much for coming onto the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast. I truly appreciate your time, and I'm super excited to learn all about your journey. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, let's talk about your immigrant journey. Tell us where you're from and when did you come to the United States?
So, I was born and raised in Egypt, in Alexandria. And I came here when I was around 10 and 11 years old for school, really. My parents decided that we would have a better education by coming to America. So that's how I ended up in New York. So we were in New York City in like a little Arab area called Astoria. So that it was like kind of familiar.
And how old were you? You said you were 10 years old?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you came with your family?
My mom and dad. And my dad had been in America for like 10 years. And then my mom, my dad, my brother, and sister all came.
Got it. And so why did your parents decide to move to New York?
So I think New York was really picked as like a really good melting pot for foreigners. You could have access to all the things you had in Egypt and all the things you wanted in America in New York, because there was like little communities that were very Arab there. There were private schools. I went to a private school that was like religious. So my parents chose locations that had a pretty decent Muslim population also. And the main thing we were coming for was a better education. My mom is a dentist, my dad is an engineer, and education in Egypt is just very different. So they wanted us to learn more, and America made the best sense for that.
Got it. Got it. So what kind of jobs did they pick up when they first immigrated?
It's like a classic immigrant story. So my dad, like he built like 3 buildings in Egypt and was a top engineer here. And then came to America and was working as a cab driver. And then he built a small little like contracting business, which he would do some work, really mainly cab driver and like contracting for majority of it. And my mother, she was a dentist here and had her own practice in Egypt. And then when she came to America, she was mostly like a mom taking care of us because like my sister was kind of smart. She skipped 3 years when she transitioned. So my mom would like study with her and then take care of us as my dad was like working. I think I'm amazed by it, like 14-hour days. Like I look back and I'm like, I would not have been able to immigrate anywhere.
And the reason why I ask is because you guys went to private school. So I'm like, okay, so were they doctors or lawyers?
I think it's such an interesting thing you see in the Arab community. Like being so close to your roots was so important to my family that it was important for my dad. Like my parents would work extra hard so that we can actually afford to go to a religious school where like people there were like us, making us feel more comfortable and not losing sight of our background or our religion. So that was super critical. Like I think one year my dad did work in construction for the principal to like subsidize some of the cost of his tuition.
I love it. That's amazing. So did your parents know English before they moved?
No, they all learned it. I don't know if you hear this a lot from immigrants, but my parents used to call the English that we spoke as we got more comfortable speaking. The English you could speak as an immigrant, which is you have to enunciate a lot more, and it always has an accent because you need to enunciate
Yeah.
because the words are just a little different. So my
Yeah.
mom learned English, and till today, like she has a very intense accent. And I think all of us as children had accents also. But I think as we went to college, like I went to 4 years where I decided to only speak English so I can get rid of my Arabic accent so that I can like sound like this.
Yeah. Yeah, your English is great. So, did your parents know anyone in New York? Okay, I know you said your dad has lived here for 10 years before he moved. Did you have any family or friends? And he just chose New York because, like you said, it's a big community of Arabic people.
Yeah, no, we didn't have anyone. There was no like relatives or family in New York. My dad was the first one here. Yeah, he didn't know anyone. Like I think nowadays when our like uncles or cousins like moved to America, we're all there. But when my dad came here, there was no one. And like when my mom came here, we were very lucky that our neighbors on the same floor of our building were also Egyptian. So we like became really close friends with our neighbors. We used to call them our cousins because like we were just together. So that was the only family we had. Like birthdays would be at their house or our house, and like that was the entire community, like this little bubble of just like two families trying to make it in the US.
Newfound cousins.
Yeah.
So, what was it like growing up in Egypt?
So Egypt is very different because you are in a third world country. So there's things that we take for granted in America that you don't realize, like
Mhm.
water and like hot water and like different things. And it's just a lot more open. Like you wake up in the morning, you go to the street, you play soccer. It's all the kids go down and play, and it's dirty, and you're using rocks as your goalpost. And I talk about my childhood to my friends, and they're always like, "What?" It's just like we had this holiday where you have to sacrifice a sheep. And like it's very, very normal for my parents to be like, "Okay, we're gonna bring a sheep through the apartment into the balcony, kill it in the balcony, and take care of this thing in the balcony." And you're like, "What?"
Wait,
Like
this
that's
is
not.
in New York?
No, in Egypt.
Oh,
Growing
in
up in
Egypt.
Egypt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In New York, you can't do that. Like that's insane. Like if you
Yeah.
have a balcony in New York, like well, so the stuff like that, you eat differently. I remember like the trans like you eat everything is like I guess it's organic. It's just like there's no you're buying food from like the streets and people all like
Yeah.
grapes are normal size. When we came
Yeah.
to America, we're like, oh my God, what is this ginormous thing that you call an apple? Like, why is
Yeah.
a grape 10 times bigger than a normal grape? And why does milk taste like water? Because we get like unpasteurized milk, you have to boil
Right.
it. So all these things that you grow up is just a different experience. The people, family is so much bigger in Egypt. My mom has 8 brothers and sisters, and my dad has 9 brothers and sisters. So, and each one of them has like 2 or 3 kids. It was normal for us. I'm the second oldest, and my sister is the oldest, to like gather all the little kids and bring them to my grandma's house because we all lived within the same building. And we would all go to my second floor where my grandma lived. And we would all the kids would come down, and there'd be like 30 of us, and we would teach them like dances and stuff. Like that's what we did. That was like fun. That's how you occupied your time. Bring everyone together and just spend all the time with your family.
Did you guys have a TV growing up?
No, we didn't. I think we had a TV and it broke. We were like, it was like a very big deal that eventually we got a TV, but like I think it broke like moving it in. So I don't remember any TV that we ever watched. And we didn't even have books, to be honest. Like I don't think my parents were really big on reading. So there wasn't really books. Everything else was just you make games out of like whatever was available. Like that's it. You just like figure it out.
Yeah.
Like your
Ve-
chairs are your friends.
Did you say chairs are your friends?
Yeah, because the chairs are like the most useful things ever. They become like obstacle courses and goalposts and like gates and anything you want, you can make a chair into that.
See, that's why immigrants are creative. They originally had friends as their chairs. I love it. I love it. Was it prominent that everyone went to a public school and then college and a university?
In Egypt, so my grandma is illiterate. And so she can't read and write still. And she raised her children. She was really obsessed because my grandpa was a boxer and he died really young. So my grandma took care of like 8 kids and she was very, very big on education. And so my mom is a dentist, her brother is a doctor and a pharmacist, an engineer, and like all variations of those like doctor dentist combination. So when we grew up, it was very important for us to also get educated. So my parents were like very well off in Egypt and lost everything when they came to America. So in Egypt, we went to like an American school. And like by American, I mean like they taught English.
Yeah.
And so we would go to school there. and everyone in the family was planning on getting like a college degree, and all of us were expected to finish school and become like doctors or dentists or engineers. So like that was always ingrained in our culture since my grandma, and that was just what was expected. So, but the education system in Egypt is very different. I'll probably talk about that a little bit when I talk going through college. I
Yeah.
think that's like the hugest separation that like I am so thankful for America, because my entire life would be different if it wasn't for the way that colleges work in America versus work in Egypt.
So, so true. So it seems like you guys have had a really good life in Egypt. Why did your parents decide to give it all up?
Yeah, because really it was the idea of learning. So we talked about a little bit about how my family cares a lot about learning
Hmm.
and education. And me and my sister and my brother, like you'll hear about us, but we all care a lot about learning. More than money, more than anything else, we care about learning as much as we can. And college in Egypt is very, very bad. Like because of the low economy, teachers don't teach in Egypt, so that you have to take like
Mm.
tutoring sessions because that's how they supplement their income. They charge for tutoring, and there's just all this corruption and like
Wow.
grades and like all these things that happen. So your entire education is completely based on how much money you can afford to pay, and that's like very limiting. Egypt hasn't really adopted innovation as a core entity. It's beginning to a little bit now, but it didn't back then.
Hmm.
So like if you wanted to learn, you were at a cap. My dad was like I think number two in when he graduated college in engineering. He knows like a decent amount of stuff, but like nowhere near what I had known 2 years into college. Like it's just like the world is scoped down so much that the options are limited, the opportunities are limited, success is limited. Like the dream in Egypt is to have an apartment and have a car and be able to feed your two kids. Like that is the dream. And you compare it to like being an entrepreneur and a founder where you want to change the world and you're
Yeah.
thinking way past bigger than yourself. People in America can believe that story. In Egypt, that's not even possible. Like that's like, what are you talking about? Why would you ever imagine that? I'm still considered the crazy one because I started a company. And they're like, why? You couldn't find a job at a bigger company that would give you a car? You're like, no, that's not how you change it, right? And like
Wow.
that's reality. And back then, I'm assuming it was even more extreme because that's today. So back then, I'm assuming my parents looked at there and said, I want my kids to have a much bigger range of opportunities.
We are so grateful and thankful for our parents for bringing us to America. So, Ahmed, tell me a little bit about the struggles that you had to go through when you first immigrated.
Yeah, so I remember so clearly, like when I first came, I was like in sort of first grade or second grade, whatever grade it was, and they gave us this train picture, and they were like fill in the months or something, and it was like
Uh-huh.
February, January, February, and I looked at that and I started crying, and then my parents they had to came and take me home. I remember you're entering a world where like you don't speak the language, you don't have friends, you don't have family support, and it's all different. So sorry, preface. I went to private school for high school, not for when I first came. So elementary school, I was in public school, and then middle school and high school, I was in a private school.
Got it.
So when I first came in, it was public school. And so then no one there spoke Arabic. I thought I had known enough about English, but like you learn English, I'm sure you probably hear this all the time, very differently. There's words that even the way we say them, you're coming in and you're like, okay, I'm going to go to the kilos. And they're like, what is a kilos? And I'm like, oh, and then like it's cold and you want your jacket. And then they're like, what are you saying? And I'm like, and people make fun of you because you're like, oh, I mean class and I mean jacket. But like we have that wording, but when you learn it in Egypt, like the alphabet is A for apple, B for banana. And you're like, what are you saying? Like everything is a little off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you come in, you're like used to like having your family and like a whole fleet of cousins and uncles and this whole world, and you come and there's no one, and your dad is working like 12 hours a day, and your mom is trying to figure out, okay, well, I'll have to go buy food and do all these things. And she used to be a dentist, and she was like used to going to work, and now she's just like trying to navigate home life. And so you're in a lot of like quick one after the other, just surprise experiences that you don't realize. I think we take a lot for granted, all those little things that you're just not used to. And I think especially also like come in middle school, like elementary and middle school, kids are we're all bratty. People are talking about like TVs and PlayStations or whatever they're using, and you have like nothing, and you're just like, I don't know. And you dress a little funny, and like my parents were like, okay, they wanted us to look good, so we're like dressed like we were like going to like I don't know like interview, and we had like bow ties and like vests. Well, you're like, why are you dressed like that? And so all these things just made the transition take a little bit longer. But like I think we were welcomed early on. Like people do make fun of you for like a bunch of things, but like it's middle school, right? Everyone makes fun, like elementary school, like they're kids. They make fun of everyone.
And so, what about the public transportation system? Did you guys use that, or you said your dad was a cab driver? Did he drive you guys to school, or how did you guys handle the transportation?
So we were close enough to walk to both elementary school and high school. Like my dad was very, very obsessed with making sure that we had mobility. So there was like a park within two parks within walking distance that we can go to, and grocery stores and like a bunch of stores and like library. And so all the things we ever needed to do was we always walked to the school and walked home. So my mom would just walk us up and we would walk back.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So before you tell our listeners about your company, tell me a little bit about the path you took. And did you try to go into any other fields before starting your business?
Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that the options that you are aware of are very limited in when like kind of coming from a different country. There's like a million majors that I didn't know existed. So when I went to college, it was like you were either a chemical engineer and you worked at an oil company, or you were a mechanical engineer, or you were a civil engineer and built bridges. Like those were the only three options that I knew existed. And I chose mechanical engineering because I was like, okay, like I like engineering, and there was that or being a doctor, and I didn't like anything related to medicine. So like you just chose, there's only two options, doctor, engineer, and you picked the one within the engineering field that matches you the most. And I remember when people first introduced me to, like you have to do a computer language. And I was like, I don't know, I speak Arabic. Is that like what you're talking about? And they're like, no. Computers have languages, and there's this thing called Java. And I had known nothing. I was like, what? You can tell a computer what to do? Like, that's amazing. So you go into college, and I was very lucky to, one of the things we also mentioned is like passion and energy and excitement and really dedication really works in America versus other countries. So in Egypt, you're based on a grade. So I got into college and I remember because admission people later told me I was the lowest SAT score to enter Cornell my year.
Wow.
And they were like, we debated about you. Either you're going to be like an incredible person at Cornell, or you're going to drop out in the first month. And I was like, great, I'll prove you guys. And like later on, I was chosen as like one of the most impressive out of the 18 most impressive Cornell students. So like I think I chose my path correctly. It was great. So I was actually leaning toward like I didn't know what to do. So I was like, let me be mechanical, maybe chemical engineering. And then I got into robotics. And I think that's really what changed my life is people took a chance on me and began teaching me and letting me kind of explore the world of robotics. So I started my career in robotics. I got really excited by making computers think like humans. We had an autonomous car in college, like that competed against the Google car and all the autonomous cars we know today. And I got more deep into like human AI and decisions. And when I graduated, I actually always thought I was like, I'm going to work my whole life in algorithms. And I ended up making my way to Raytheon. I did AI for missile defense. Like really did a lot of intelligence there. Was doing really well. But we talk about being different. We're going as an Arab named Ahmed in Raytheon is like the most extreme Fox News watching, like closed-minded society. You're talking about like a huge difference. It was like, I was like definitely like, who is this person? So I then made my way into the startup community. And then while I was at a startup, there was a problem that I was seeing so I joined WeWork to build out their data team. And while building out data for them, I saw this huge problem. And it was really about what it takes to do an analysis at a company. So I start off and I'm like, I'm going to build smart buildings. And WeWork is going to have the smartest buildings that are going to respond to you. And I'm going to use all these algorithms. Then you're like, yeah, good luck. First, you have to analyze data and you can answer basic questions. And then you go to answer questions and do analyses, like understanding what customers are doing. And it's like, good luck. You have to work on data engineering because the infrastructure related to answer questions is really complicated and mess. And you go down to the earliest part of the collecting data and transforming data. And what you realize is that what it takes to get to an analysis is really, really, really hard. And most companies will spend so much money and time and resources and still struggle to like answer basic questions because of the way that the world of infrastructure is. And once you get all this stuff set up and it takes you like months and months and months, and then you can do one analysis, all that work you did, if you were going to do a similar analysis or the same analysis for another company, you have to redo the whole thing. So like everyone
Wow.
is just redoing 90% of the work. And the idea was, wait a second. We can't move forward in this world if for us to understand customers and behavior. So we found a problem, and I decided what would it be like if we changed kind of all of data. So the idea was, what if I can standardize all of data in the world into a single table? That's just like a simple 11 column table. And what if I can use that table to answer any question? And what if I could take any question and copy and paste it for any company in the world?
Wow.
So, and the idea that if you can do all those things, theoretically, I can take an analysis from one company and then copy and paste it to another company without doing any of the work, because we standardize the input, and therefore we can reuse the analysis.
Wow. So is this like a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and running macros?
So that for big data. So you imagine like companies today, like a WeWork, has like 5,000 Excel sheets where you have thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of rows of data with like thousands of columns. So WeWork,
Wow.
for example, had about 5,000 of these. And the idea was, what if I can take all that and all the important stuff and make it into a single 11 column Excel sheet that's really long, and the same 11 columns are for every company in the world. Then you standardize data and you can reuse and share and rebuild and redo all these things with analyses.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. So you basically found a problem, a consistent problem at WeWork, and you jumped on the solution, and that's how you created your company.
Yeah, with 3 years in the middle, but yes. When
If you,
you start a company, I think there's different kinds of companies. One kind of the company that we started was really a problem first. So like there was no solution. People invested in our ability to try to figure out a solution that works, because theoretically what we were doing, I can name hundreds of companies that had tried it over the years, and it's impossible. Like how the hell do you take all the data, do with that? Like
wow.
every company's different, everybody's unique. And we entered the field knowing that this is nearly impossible. But if done and done well enough, this can really change how the entire world, like for the first time ever, all of data analysis can be shared and people can work together to make better decisions. So a company that's like two people can now compete with Amazon in terms of quality understanding of their customer, even though Amazon has 1,000 engineers powering their like data and helping them answer questions. And this company just has Narrator. And like that's what you wanted to create. And that's how you allow everyone to move forward much faster. Like the kind of the rising tide raises all ships. By changing how data analytics is done, you can actually raise and elevate all startups to be on the same level of competition with these giants that have a lot more resources than them.
Wow. So you did the impossible. That's like kind of historical.
uh,
That's amazing. That's amazing. So who are your maybe major clients for this type of data solution?
yeah, so we work with a lot of like e-commerce brands, bigger companies, more data-oriented companies. So right now, most of our customers are ranging between Series B, C startups. So they have like they're doing $1 million in revenue, a million a month in revenue, and they're trying to better understand their customer. And we're like a data system, and it's growing in the data community. Like I mentioned, what we did has been considered to be impossible for the longest time, and now that after 3 years, it begins to work. So a lot of people are beginning to be like, okay, well, like bullshit. I want to see it. Like so, slowly and surely, like every call I have starts with, "This sounds too good to be true. You must be full of shit. I don't believe you." And slowly it gets to, okay, that's clever. That's clever. I see what you did there. And then when they see we're about to launch our big, what's called our narrative templates, where you literally can search up a question, and we've answered so many questions that, and we have these handwritten by experts analyses. So like you're like, what attribution model should I use? Instantly get a full analysis written by an expert in marketing, tested that analysis with like, I think for that one is like 45 companies. And you can get the answer in a story format that walks you through what happened and how the decision is made and answers your question for you instantly. And I think that's usually what gets people to be like, wow, this is something special.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question. What was the question that you mentioned?
What attribution model should I use? So marketing
Attribution model.
companies, yeah, they spend money on like, you probably get targeted with a bunch of ads. And there's a big question on how do you understand the value of advertisement? Well, the first thing is, how do I tie an advertisement to the person? And this is the figuring out which way and how to tie it. It's called an attribution model. And that's what you want to make sure that you're doing, because it's very easy for you to spend 6 years building an attribution model and get really complicated when you don't need to. And it ends up misleading your decisions so that you're spending money and not getting the value that you expected. So quality attribution model plus a quality understanding of your customer acquisition cost would really allow you to spend money significantly better and just make the impact that you hope to make.
Wow, what an amazing journey. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, Ahmed, how old were you when you started your business?
25 years old.
25 years old. Wow, that's super, super young. What an accomplishment. So I saw that you were featured on 30 under 30 list for 2021 next year. Tell me a little bit about that. How did you get on there? Do you know who nominated you?
Yeah, so I actually do know who nominated me because it's one of our customers and
Oh,
one of the
okay.
users of our, because he was like, Ahmed, I nominated you. And I was like, cool, thank you. Yeah, so 30 under 30 is really, I think, about people who are trying to make a big impact on the world. And the incredible people that have been there in the past and this year are all people, when you read their stories, they're really making a humongous difference in food and science, in engineering, in
Hmm.
like social impact. So I'm very, very like humbled and incredibly amazed that I was able to join them. And I think the biggest thing that like kind of led to that is I think when you think about like the customers, the one who nominated me, he was a data analyst. He works alone. He does things very much on his own. He's like, I told you, there's like this huge upfront work in months and months. And what he saw in Narrator was a difference in lifestyle and a difference in the world that we are creating. And I think that excited him enough to really share that story with the Forbes team, because as Narrator continues to grow, you're going to allow sharing. So whatever he does and all the work he does, not from scratch on his own, it's built on top of shoulders of giants, and he can then set it up for the next generation to make even more impact. So now that work that was so like soul crushing alone, doing everything from scratch to build something to try to do it has just became different. It becomes part of a community where he's starting off way with an analysis already done and everything he needs, and he can actually build upon it. And I think for the data community, this is something that's much needed. And I think for the first time as a data community, we are moving together as a whole, willing to share and improve it. And this something has existed in the software community for a while. Like you have the concept of open source and React, and the whole world, like people in the software community share all their work all the time. And you see the innovation that we can have today is mostly building stuff on top of the back of open source technology that people have built. Like internet as a whole is kind of an open source technology that enabled us to do more of these protocols. And just like the world has been able to move so much thanks to software being open. And I'm excited for seeing the same thing happening with our understanding of our customers, our understanding of people, our understanding of self, and being able to create a world where that's actually possible. I think that myself, the customers that use the product, and the person who nominated me viewed that as the one of the like a big shift in how we are going to behave. I think that seems to have excited the Forbes community to look into myself a little bit more. And then we talk and share the journey of building a company, as you can imagine, is gruesome, especially when you're trying to do something very different and people think it's impossible. Like, how do you sell something that like might eventually work, but doesn't really work right now? And you need to like raise money, but it could possibly work, but no one has done it. And there's enough companies that have died trying to do it that it's like recommended not to do it. And theoretically, you can't wrap your head around it. So it takes a long time. Like our first investor was so incredible to like believe in us enough to give us a chance. And then we take that money, but it then takes us a long time to get it to work. We're innovating. It's an impossible problem. And then you have to sell it, but it's like really janky because it's really hard to build it. So we were like struggling. We almost died. At one point, everyone in the company went down to minimum wage. So like,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, but now you're coming on the other side. And I think people value the determination that you did to continue that battle and the impact that we get to make on every single one of our customers' lives every day.
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited that you guys are doing some powerful things out there in the software and data analysis world. Good stuff. So you mentioned you guys raised capital. Is it okay if I ask you how much capital you guys raised?
Yeah. So we raised, I think, a total of like $7.5 million. Our last round was nearly, we did like a $6.2 million Series A round, led by Initialized Capital.
Got it. And are you guys going to do any more?
Yeah. The startup game doesn't end. You just keep going. So You raise money, then you use it to grow, and then you raise more money so you can use it to grow. So yeah, we're probably going to do another round in a year or so.
Mhm.
It really depends on where we want to take the company and how we want to grow it. So we're
Got
pretty in
it.
a good place right now that we have a very small team and we're nearly profitable. So we have good control of our own destiny, and we're going to
Mhm.
do what's kind of best to maximize that growth of the company in a way that doesn't lose its culture and is sustained.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. So, how long did it take you guys to start to see some real traction in the beginning stages?
So I mentioned we struggled for like 2 years. The company almost died. We made it out. We went to YC, and it took us like I think like nearly 2.5 years before we started seeing some sort of traction.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think the way the traction started coming is, first of all, the product started working. So requirement one is you have a working product.
Yeah.
And working is really tricky because I mentioned we're trying to do something so different. And part of the way you solve a problem that's impossible is you change culture while you're changing with the product. So the product, it has to take advantages of the affordances that you know, and also change how we think about data and how we ask and answer questions. So that's a huge thing to get people to change their mind. And it requires a lot of thought into our user experience and all the little pieces. And when you try to go end to end, like the whole vision of Narrator is very big.
Hmm.
And like to do the copy and paste analysis is an incredible product. We're actually about to launch that in mid January, but we weren't there yet. So we're selling the technology and hoping and showing people all the things you can do with the ability to answer questions really fast. So just like any new technology, you have an industry where everyone is using a tool, and the fundamental approach that the whole data world is built upon is different than ours. So when you Google best practice or anything, it's not going to be us. We're telling you to not use the best practice because the best practice is the only thing that's available to people right now.
Hmm.
So what ended up happening, I think, with YC, with us raising money, with us blogging, sharing more, doing a lot more talks, people started giving us the time of day to be like, okay, maybe you have something. Let's hear it. And I think slowly one customer and after the next customer started believing and saying, okay, we'll try it. We'll try it. We'll try it. And then soon you had people talking about us and recommending us. And it's still like this battle is not going to stop now. There's still like 90% of my conversations I have are with people who don't know us, who are like, why are you telling me to change everything? This seems like a lot. And we're like, we're not. We're trying to kind of add to your system. And here's the value. And they're like, I've never heard anyone do this. And you're like, yeah, that's the point. Like, this
Yeah.
is innovation. So that's kind of what it really took. Blood, Sweat, and Tears is really like, I think this is the name of the game in early stage companies. It's just like kind of hustling through it, going after one rejection after the other rejection, not being affected, being positive, having your team, making sure that they feel loved and you work together and everyone together kind of chisels away at this really huge thing that you're trying to make a difference. And unlike a lot of other companies, we're innovating in one of the fastest growing, most innovative fields. We're not innovating in like a low tech field. Like if you're like this company, like real estate doesn't use technology and now we're going to add technology to it. That's like first level innovation. When you're talking about like Amazon, Google, and all these data companies are selling you their most advanced AI and machine learning and all this stuff for data analytics, and we're going to one up them as they have thousands and hundreds of thousands of engineers building the most advanced technology, and we're going to build you something that's such a huge leap forward that you're going to be willing to take a risk and use this small company instead of these giants. And it's going to be such a fundamentally different approach that like you have to change how you think. We're asking a lot of our customers, most of our customers who go through that journey with us see the value of why we do it. But you are going up against giants, and it's not an easy way to fight.
Yeah, yeah, you guys are innovators for sure. And for those of us that don't know what YC is a Y Combinator company that funds early stage startups, right?
It's an incubator program. So they fund you and they provide you with resources and experts, and you kind of work with them to help kind of grow your business. So
Yeah.
it's an incredible team of people that come together. All of them are startup founders. So you're like really get to work with people who understand what it's like to be you.
So I wanted to ask you about mentors and if you had any mentors that helped you out to start your business.
Yeah. What is life without mentors?
Right.
Um, I like can sit here and name like thousands of people that enabled me to be where I am today. There's some close, very close people that really stuck by me. So when I left WeWork, a lot of the people that were with me at WeWork continued to like talk to me every single week. WeWork's VP of product, Andy Palmer, would sit with me every week and I would tell him what's going on and we would talk about it. WeWork's former CTO would sit with me and I would talk to him about what's going on with Narrator. He was actually one of the people who sat with me and came up with the name Narrator. The person that actually hired me into WeWork when I first interned at WeWork, he's the one that gave us our seed round. So he's the one that put in the first $300,000 check and then the next $1 million check. So
Wow.
people have been in journeys, and it's not just like mentorship where they give me advice. They sit with me and talk to me for hours. Or my head of data for WeWork also is one of my close friends. And it's these kind of people that you're able to bounce ideas off and continue talking to them to help us. And we had those things for the like kind of building a team world. And technically, like my former boss's boss at WeWork would talk to me all about like he was a VP of engineering at WeWork, helping me with figuring out what to do. He later on joined the company. So he's one of our team members.
Nice.
And our principal engineer, when you're building a data company, security and infrastructure are so huge. And person Nathan, who's like one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, this genius person would help us figuring out all this stuff. And he was like actively engaged and then eventually joined us too. I think every single person we hired either like started as helping us and then spent a day with us and then was a contractor and then worked part-time and then eventually like became full-time.
Well, that's amazing how the people at WeWork didn't see you as a competitor and they were willing to help you and guide you in the little ways that they could. So that's awesome too. So Ahmed, looking back at your immigrant entrepreneur career and knowing what you know now, would you want to change anything or do anything differently?
So, of course, the answer is yes. I think there's so many things that I'm going to rephrase the question to be like, what do I hope for the next entrepreneur? Because I think from my perspective, like there's all these things that I wish were there. And I can argue that them not being there made me stronger. But really, let's talk about the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I think that like, I'm here in Egypt talking to other entrepreneurs that are Egyptian. I don't know what it is, but it's like, even just having people who are like you makes the journey a lot less lonely. The things that I remember like keeping me sane were other people from Cornell that I was like, okay, we share some story. Other people that were CEOs and we share some stories and really helping each other, being like, you're not crazy. But I think it matters to have someone who looks and knows how you grew up and knows kind of some of the early values you have, because they can also support you in that emotional level that you don't have. So I always wish that there was more communities out there for immigrants and more communities for for immigrant founders or even Arab founders. There's a conversation that a lot of people couldn't resonate with me, which is like, how do you tell your parents you're starting a company? I told my parents a year after I started a company that I started a company. Because as an immigrant, it's a big deal. It's not respected. It's really looked down upon. You're like giving up your money and everything you had to go do something to help. And they're like, I don't get why. Like, you just need to like have a car. So having communities where you can have that conversation, it's critical. And stuff like this podcast that got me so excited about it is I'm sure there's someone else, one of your listeners going, yeah, I remember I don't want to start a company because I also don't know how to tell my mom I want to start a company. Like, because family is such a big deal to us and they're so tight. So when I think about those kind of things, I think about like, that's what I wish was more. I wish there was more community. I wish there was more people to help you. And I wish people knew that they can ask, because it takes a lot of guts. I think entrepreneurs have a lot of similar personalities, because you have to kind of like go after what you want, pretty much ask for help. And it's hard to ask for help. I go to like WeWork and I had all these people who respected me and cared for me that I can be like, hey, talk to me every week because I don't know what I'm doing. That's hard. And creating communities where that's okay, where people know some of the issues that you're not embarrassed to talk about, I think is the biggest thing that we can do for the next generation. There's a famous poem I like that talks about this old man who like crosses this chasm and then stops, and he's going back and building a bridge. And this traveler comes and asks him, hey, old man, you've crossed this chasm that's very dangerous that like multiple times by yourself. Why are you keep going back to try to build this bridge? You've already passed it. Mm-hmm. And the old man says, there comes a generation that has to come that some of them, this chasm might actually hurt them or cause them dim, young man, I'm building this bridge for him. So it's really about like building the bridge for the next generation to go further. And that's the stuff that I like think about a lot. And how do I help that as I continue to use other bridges that people have built for me. So the next immigrant who's scared to start a company because of family issues, how does that person have a community to talk about and be able to then get that courage? Just like I'm going to do the same thing as I continue to grow. And you're asking other people who've already done what I've done and raised their next round and continue to grow and have made a bigger impact. You're constantly looking at those mentors and those communities to help you. How do we also create the same communities for people with a little bit more of our circumstances who deal with issues that I think other people won't deal with? I mean, other people do, but just kind of people who look like you, who have similar issues, who will feel comfortable asking you those questions.
And I totally agree with you because I had this one guy on the show and he told his mom that he was going to start, his business, and she could not understand it. She was still back home, and 5 years later, she still does not know what he's trying to do. And she still can't wrap her head around him starting a business. And, he was just like, Mom, it's been 5 years. Come on, get over it. So yeah, I totally agree with you because a lot of times, immigrant parents want the education piece, right? They think that the education is so big to the American dream. And then, after that, you get a career and then you have a career job for, the next 20, 30 years. And then you tell them you're starting a business. They're like, no, your education is important. Go back to your job. And education is important. I'm not discounting, but I think for immigrant parents, I totally agree with you. They're in that mindset where it's like, go get your job and get a car.
Because stability for them was the goal. Like when they came to America, they lost everything. And for them, they viewed the world as there's stability and there's lack of stability. And they viewed themselves as they didn't, like my father didn't have stability. He lived paycheck to paycheck. He worked his ass off, and there would be days where he would worry about like food and like life because the job market, like he doesn't get enough rides in a day, and now he's worried about something. And you have to hustle to make it. So when they see our generation and they see us having stability and choosing to let go of it, like to choose to have less money, to choose to have more risk, to choose to leave that stability behind, in their minds, that seems crazy. I remember like 2 years or a year and a half, somebody came and they're like, "Oh, did you quit your startup?" And I was like, "No." And then they were like, "Oh, your dad is telling people that you have a different job." And I was like, "Dad, why don't you tell people that I work for my company?" And he's like, "It's too embarrassing to tell people that you are jobless." And I'm like, "No, I like have a company." And they're like, yeah, like you're jobless. Or actually, even funnier, I think explaining to your parents the concept of raising money, I think is very confusing.
Yeah.
Because
just don't tell them.
They hear that as, you're like, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're going around begging for money." And I'm like, "No, it's raising money." He's like, "No, you're begging for money." And like, why would somebody give you money? You guys don't have profit. Like, how much money are you going to give them back? And I'm like, "Well, no, they want the potential." And he's like, no, like, I don't get it. I'm like, my dad still tells me, he's like, I dream that you like have a big oak desk and you sit behind your desk and you have people that work for you. And I'm like, that dream is not today's dream. I work for my team. Like my team should yell at me. They don't work for me. I work for them, and I don't have an oak desk. My job is to walk around to make sure that anyone who needs me, I'm available. So I'm not going to lock myself in a room. Like, and they're like, "What? You're not a manager then. You're not a boss. What are you doing?" So all these things are the things that we like. Me and you can talk about this conversation and laugh.
Yeah.
I think that it's so hard for like when you talk to some other people. Like this is what I mean when I talk about a community is like this exact sharing and understanding and empathizing that you can do with me is something I think very unique to immigrants.
Yeah. But hopefully with this podcast, there will be a really nice community coming out of it to help immigrants with their journeys. And your story is going to, oh my goodness, inspire so many immigrants to keep on going and to create their dream entrepreneur job. So thank you. Thank you so much. So I wanted to ask you about failures. How do you look at them and how do you overcome them? And I really want to know specifically how you mentioned that you guys were kind of like done with startup at like 2 years in and everyone went down to minimum wage. Did you have at any point in time want to ever give up during that stage?
Yeah, you want to give up every day. I think that one of the things that you'll like learn building a company is that failure is nothing. Like Nobody cares about failure and nobody remembers failure. It's this thing that you will fail 1,000 times and it's just the nature of it. So the first time you fail, you're like, oh my God, things didn't work out. Everything I thought about was collapsing. And you want to quit. And you're like, what am I doing? Why did I do this? And there's like two things that are always going to keep you sane. One is your team. Your team believes in what the company is doing, and you have a mission and a vision, and everyone is like, our job is to remind everyone of why we still do it. Like my team would tell me like, hey, do you remember what it was like for your team in WeWork when they really spent months to do their job and it was miserable? Should I read the emails that you were trying to change? And this world with data is terrible. It's faulty. It's really bad. We're going to change that. And you need to remember that whenever you're feeling exhausted. So your team is always reminding you there's a community of other startups. So like I had a community of other CEOs who would be like, yep, it is a lonely job there and it sucks. And like, no one is ever going to be happy with you. Like CEO, no one is ever like, good job, CEO, until like you're like, you make a big round. But the day to day, your team is like, we want more of this. We want less of this. We need this. And your job is to serve them. Your investors are like, grow faster, work harder. Your job is to serve them. Your customer is like, this is broken, fix it. Your job is to serve them. And when you have these three dimensions, your job is to balance all those things and make sure that everyone is happy and moving forward and aligned. And like, it's a lonely ass job being a CEO. So, and you suck at it, you fail, and you have to own your failures, and you will do things that could be bad for your culture, and you got to like undo them because you set the culture early on. If you read Super Pumped or Bad Blood, you'll know what toxic cultures are like. You're trying to counteract them, but you kind of realize that you can't really hold failure too much. And so it becomes like this thing like kind of like stubbing your toe. It sucks. It happens without you realizing. You can be very careful when you walk, but you're still going to stub your toe and it's going to hurt. And then you move on. And then guess what? You forgot the last time you stubbed your toe, even though it might have happened like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
It becomes like such a natural thing that happens.
I do want to hone in on something that you said that was so powerful. Serving, right? Serving the investors, serving your customers, serving your team. I think if entrepreneurs really understood that this whole entrepreneurship is really about serving the community, serving everyone around, becomes a much easier and becomes a very compassionate part of the entrepreneur journey. So thank you. Thank you for refreshing us with that. And I truly appreciate the fact that this is all really about serving everyone around us. So that's awesome.
So just kind of adding a little tiny note to that, because your job is to serve, you build a relationship with your team of love. And that becomes super important. Like I mentioned earlier, 2 years in, we ran out of money. Like we didn't have enough money coming in, and it's really hard to raise when you don't have any customers and you don't have any cash to build. And your team is all willing to go down to minimum wage with you. You just realize how much people are willing to take risks with you and be with you as a team. And together we can fight this battle and pursue for a greater goal. I think startups right now get this culture of like, hoorah, like we got to do it. We're going to become billionaires. No, you really don't. Like you don't become a billionaire on a startup. Like it's a really terrible way to make money. I personally think like, you do have your duty. And if you and your team are all together caring for each other, then failure is a lot less lonely because you have a bunch of people to fail with.
Yeah, I'm so powerful. Thank you. So let's switch gears and talk about successes. Are there any successes that you would like to outline from your immigrant entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, so there's a lot of successes that you have also along the way, and we celebrate them. First time you raise money, and every time you raise money, it's incredible. You see people who believe in your vision and want to join you and have a part in this company. So every time you raise money, it's always exciting. And I'm sure a bunch of people on the podcast talk about it. But there's a couple other times that I think successes where you truly, truly get excited. One is when your customer tells you they love you, or they tell you that they love you. It's like a big deal. You're like a shapeless, nameless company, and somebody's like, I want to let you know that I love you. And you're like, like, you make my day better. And that moment, you're just like, oh shit, like this feeling is exactly why we work hard. The same thing goes on with your team. Just today, like earlier before this call, we have a feature called templates, and we get to use them, this whole like copy and paste analysis that we're going to release soon. And my team member, Brittany, she runs data for us. She goes, I love using narrative templates. It is so amazing. I got to do this whole thing that I remember I spent like months doing. I just did it in a minute. I'm so excited. I love using this tool. And when your team tells you that they love using your own product, because there's a lot of companies that don't use their own product, or like
Right.
they use their own product, but they don't love it. But like when you have people that love using your own product and customers who love you for creating this thing and helping bring something to the world, I think to me, those wins are take 1,000 losses in a row and have someone at the end of the day tell you tell you they love you. And you're like, damn, I gotta go.
That's awesome.
So
So, thank you so much for sharing that, Ahmed. Is giving back either a volunteering time or giving back to the community something that is part of your business values?
yes. So me and my team are super passionate about mainly about giving back with our skill set. So whether it's teaching, which we do a lot of, or giving back our expertise. So when we work with nonprofits, and any nonprofit listening, please reach out if you want to be part of this journey. We don't like to donate money. What we like to do is donate expertise, because a nonprofit, it's expensive for them to hire an engineer. And we have engineers who are 15 years of experience and very talented, and we can offer them for a little bit of time so that they can help really make an impact. We'll do like nonprofits are spending money. Why don't they use Narrator? And we can help them manage, optimize their spend. And we'll do that as our service. So it's like having a team of experts providing their resources for you for free. And that's kind of how we give back. If you've ever looked at my LinkedIn, like there's a lot of like younger kids there from like age 14 to people in college that I am consistently mentoring through just whether they're on an entrepreneurship journey or doing math or physics, which is what I like to teach. So those are the kind of things that way that we like to give back to our community. So either through teaching, whether it's like kind of guiding through teaching math, teaching physics, teaching a kind of data and data literacy, or offering our unique skill sets that are very expensive to get in the market. So
Hmm.
whether you need a data expert to help you optimize your spend and you don't want to pay the $200,000 that you would need to get someone,
Hmm.
or a good software engineer to help you improve your search engine optimization or update your website. Those are the kind of ways that we find that our company can do lasting impact. That's crucial. This is like a more personal opinion. So a lot of companies look at community service as part of like their marketing budget, and it's like something that they talk a lot about.
Hmm.
And we are not like that. Like we are, if you you can talk to people who know us and have worked with us, but we like to focus a lot more on it is part of our company culture, and we all do it together. And it's about really making an impact. Like we're not the kind of company who will come together and just like help do volunteer together and clean or do something like that, which is very, very helpful. We
Hmm.
find that the biggest impact we can make is by lending and offering skill sets that those nonprofits and those companies would have to spend a lot of money to get. And
Hmm.
we would rather save them the recruiting, the hiring, the salaries, and
Hmm.
just provide our skill sets to them in a more active role.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. So what's next for you, Ahmed? What are some business goals for the next couple of years? Anything that you can share with us?
Yeah. So we're going to launch the narrative template. So you should see our updated website coming out soon with our big launch.
Nice.
I think that's going to be really exciting for people. So that's the next big thing that we are pushing forward for companies to really experience Narrator. And we talked a lot about this community, that wide data. We haven't really built a data community. We've been really one-on-one with customers, and we need to get to a world where we're building that community. So by toward mid and next year, we can release our first version of the community where for the first time ever, analysts and data scientists can start sharing their work. And you'll see a world where people can actually like open source their analyses. And we're going to make that available for everyone to do and maintain that relationship. So like you as a company, as a data analyst, can talk about the attribution analysis with another company without either of you ever sharing your data. You're all looking at your individual data. You're looking at a similar analysis. You're looking at the logic that's making it, and you can talk about like what you're going to do. And I think that we can help make the world of data a little bit less lonely and a lot more together. And that's kind of the biggest thing I'm excited for.
That's genius. And I'm sure a lot of people getting together with all that brain power, you can develop a lot more different niches, a lot of different products out there. So that's so, so powerful. getting everyone together. So that's amazing. Ahmed, so I want to wrap up with some really, really fast questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What time do you normally start your day?
When I wake up, I don't use alarms.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So you can wake up like at 9, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, I go anytime I want, and I work that way. And everyone in my
Wow.
company gets to do the same thing.
Wow. That's awesome. I want to get on your level.
We
How
should
many?
make it convenient. Like, why force you to work at early mornings or late afternoons if that's not how you work? So
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So the next one is, how many employees do you have?
we're 7 people right now.
7?
Team, yeah, 7.
Awesome. Awesome. How often do you watch TV in a week?
I don't own a TV, but I'll have my computer and watch like an episode or 2 episodes probably a week of like TV shows.
Okay. So like an hour or two a week.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how many hours of work do you normally put in, say, in a week?
I don't know. I spend a lot of time talking to people, so I don't really consider that work. Like an average, like, I don't know, 8 to 10 a day, so like 40 to 50.
Oh, that's not bad at all. That's awesome.
Yeah, most of our teams have kids, and a lot of them have been working half time since COVID started. So you don't need to work 100 hours to make dreams come true. I don't like that.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, Ahmed, thank you so much for coming on to the show. You are extremely innovative and you're changing the world and the data community out there. And I absolutely love what you're doing. So, thank you so much for sharing your journey with the world. And I'm sending you all the best of successes your way. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm excited, and thank you for giving me a platform to share some of these things. I appreciate you tremendously.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If there are any links that were mentioned in this episode, make sure to check them out on my website under this episode to find all the links conveniently located in the show notes. I just wanted to ask for a quick favor if you could please leave a review wherever you're at listening to this podcast. Also, if you're an immigrant entrepreneur and would love to be on my podcast, please email me and we'll get connected. I'll see you guys all next time for another exciting and impactful episode. Take care.